morning, everybody. I don't know how many of you guys are big sports fans. Some of you guys, if I start talking about sports at all, are going to be like, this is a lot, Jim. But some of you, you'll totally understand what I'm about to say. So if you don't follow sports the next 30 seconds to 2 minutes, just aren't going to mean anything to you. But for the rest of you, listen in what I got to say here. Do you know that feeling of recording a game and going to do something else with the goal of going to see the game after you get home and wanting nobody to let you know what the score is? You know, that goal of I'm going to get home and I want to see this. And the entire time, you do not want anybody to tell you about the game. And people will come up and they say, hey, did you hear? Like, no, I don't need to know. I don't know. Hey, did you hear about this? I don't need to know. You don't want to know because once you know, it's kind of like, it feels, why do I need to watch the game anymore? I have a close relationship in my life. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and throw him under the bus. He actually may listen to this today. My brother, I have 3 brothers, and one of my brothers, his name is Justin. He lives in Florida. There it is. It's all out there. Justin has a tendency to be a scoreboard in a text message thread that we have. And there's nothing I can do about it. So Justin will text and say, hey, check out, did you know OU was up on this? And I'll be like, oh, man. Thanks, bud. But I'll tell you what. In some ways, it's advantageous. When my favorite team is losing or has lost, and I get to hear about it early on, it kind of saves me the pain of having to go suffer through it. But there's a cooler thing that happens. When my favorite team is winning or has won, I can go sit down and watch the game, and regardless of how stressful the game situation is, I know how this ends. Regardless of whether or not the team looks like there's no way they're going to be able to win this game. They're down 2 touchdowns. There's no way they're going to be able to catch up. I can sit there and silently think to myself, this is going to be awesome. Because this looks terrifying. But it's going to be great because they're going to win. You know what I'm talking about? It's a super great thing that you get to experience. Today we're going to be finishing up the book of Daniel. And the book of Daniel is that. Because what we're going to see in Daniel chapter 12, if you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn there. If you don't have a Bible, grab one of those Bibles in the seat in front of you. We're going to be digging in together in Daniel 12. Actually, if you don't have a Bible with you, you're welcome to take that one home. We want everybody who comes to worship with us to have a Bible. But what we see as we're studying through Daniel is some hard times. The second half of Daniel 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, are built around what is going to happen after the time of Daniel and actually what is going to happen at the very end of time. In Daniel chapter 10 and 11, what you see if you go and read that is a really amazing thing. Daniel is given a vision of what's going to happen. So Daniel's writing about 500 years before AD, so 500 BC. He's writing this out, and he's talking about something that he sees, and he ultimately talks about this stuff that's going to happen in Israel around 170 BC, and it's really an amazing thing because he goes in Daniel chapter 10 and 11, really fact for fact, what we see in history. It's a very direct and accurate prediction of what was going to happen. But at the end of Daniel chapter 10 and 11, something strange happens. Daniel goes, and he's talking about these things. He's talking about this guy, as Brandon talked about last week, Antiochus Epiphanes, and this abomination when he goes and he sets up an idol in the temple of God to Zeus. And he sets this idol up and sacrifices a pig on the idol, on the altar that was meant for God. It's just an abomination, a direct attack on the people and worship of God. But after that, as Daniel continues to describe what's coming, he turns away from what was going to happen at 170 BC, and he shifts to the distant future. He shifts to what is going to happen at the very end of time. And actually what we see in Revelation really ties back to what we see in Daniel chapter 12. And so what we're going to look at today in Daniel chapter 12 is God giving Daniel wisdom for what is coming. Now, I share all of this because much of it is going to feel like the situation I was talking about, where you sit down and you're watching a basketball game or a football game, and you see what looks like impending doom. And it's only because it is. But Daniel gives this to us. He gives this to the people of God because the end of the story doesn't end badly. The point is this: even though things are looking scary, in the end, God is not finished working. It's what I want you to see today as we're studying through this passage, is Satan is going to attack God's people. We're going to see dark times. We see this today. We're going to see hard times. We're going to see darkness reigning and looking like there is no hope. We're going to see all of these things. But the reason God gives this to us in the Bible isn't to scare us. It isn't to make us feel like there is no hope. I see the awful things happening. Please don't let that happen in my time. We see all these things, but the point is, at the end of the day, we don't have to be afraid because God is not done. Because the God who made all of this, as France just read a moment ago in Proverbs chapter 3, that we can trust in the Lord with all our heart and not lean on our own understanding, because our understanding says this is going to be terrible. None of this is going to work. Instead, it says, in all of your ways, if you will acknowledge God, if you will acknowledge Him with your heart and your thoughts, He will make your path straight. Today, what we're going to see is that. We're going to see how God straightens a path for the people, for His people, when it looks like everything is hopeless. So starting in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1 through 4, we're going to dig in this morning to the very end. At that time, Michael, the archangel, who stands guard over your nation, will arise. Then there will be a time of anguish greater than any since the nations first came into existence. But at that time, every one of your people whose name is written in the book will be rescued. Many of those whose bodies lie dead and buried will rise up, some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting disgrace. Those who are wise will shine as bright as the sky, and those who lead many to righteousness will shine like the stars forever. But you, Daniel, keep this prophecy a secret. Seal up the book until the end of time, until the time of the end, when many will rush here and there and knowledge will increase. So understand something right off the bat as we read this. This very much echoes what Jesus says later on in Matthew chapter 24 when Jesus goes and he starts talking to the apostles about how bad things are going to be. And he talks about how the anguish that is coming is going to be worse than any that has ever been before. The angel Gabriel was sent to Daniel to prepare him for this. But he was sent to prepare the people for this so that they would not be afraid. I want to talk to you guys a moment about fear. When we think about the things that Satan uses to attack us as people, to get us to doubt God, the things that Satan and the dark forces of this world get us to lose our faith, it's not necessarily anger, as much as anger can destroy us. Some of us know the feeling of having issues with anger and not being able to control that. It's not necessarily physical lusts and this need to constantly satisfy ourselves, although many of us know that feeling of, I just wish I didn't have this need in my body. My life would be so much easier. But there's a root thing that doesn't come from God that hits us, and it owns so many of these other things. The primary weapon that Satan often uses to attack us is fear. Making us afraid makes us make decisions that we know are not of God's will. Right? When I'm afraid that I'm going to always be alone, I will do things with people to try and hold on to them. When I'm afraid that I am not going to have any control over a situation, I will lash out in anger to try and hold on to control. When I am afraid that I'm going to be hungry and not satisfied, I will fill myself with everything that I possibly can to have some satisfaction now, knowing that it's going to hurt later. You see, fear is a weapon that destroys us. And so Daniel now is given this word from God so that when everything is coming, when all of these things are happening, the people of God will not be surprised. Verse 2 and 3, as we read there just a moment ago, says this: Many of those whose bodies are buried will rise up, some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting disgrace. Those who are wise will shine as bright as the sky, and those who lead many to righteousness will shine like stars forever. You see, Daniel is shown, and this is actually the first time that we see in the scriptures a very specific teaching. Before this, we see hints of this, but this is the first time we see the specific teaching of the people who are followers of God, the people who trust Him, the people who say, I'm not living for me, I'm living for Him, it says, are going to rise up to everlasting life. To not have to fear death, to not have to fear these things. Rise up to life instead of death. You see, what God is giving Daniel now and what God is giving us in this in the long run is that we do not have to fear the things that everybody fears. We don't have to fear that we're going to be forgotten. We don't have to fear that there is no hope. We don't have to fear that death is going to win and I'm just going to cease to exist. At the end of the day, this is a reference that Paul makes later on in 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 14 through 16. For the Lord Himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, with the voice of an archangel, and with the sound of the trumpet of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together, and with them in the clouds, to meet the Lord in the air. And so we will always be with the Lord. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. What Paul is talking about here was first talked about in Daniel chapter 12, that there is coming a day when Jesus will come back. That even though there is darkness and evil and brokenness, and it seems like it's just getting worse, that there is coming a day when Jesus will come back. 2,000 years ago, Jesus came for the first time. And we read the story, as we'll read next week, of a baby in a manger. We read of this little baby who is defenseless. But when Jesus comes again, He will not be coming defenseless. Jesus is going to come back to make right what we see as broken, what we know as broken, what we see as evil, what we see as darkness in this world does not have to be this way forever. And what Daniel is saying right now, what he is given is a vision of that. Look at 3 again. It's amazing. Those who are wise will shine as bright as the sky, and those who lead many to righteousness will shine like the stars forever. There is coming a day when the names of those who simply put their trust in God and then instead of themselves are written down in the book of life. Those who yearn for that will have their names written down in the book of life. This is the thing that we get to look forward to. Now, understand something. Understand something. This is on the heels of what I said was in Daniel chapter 10 and 11, which is the end of 11 is an illustration of Satan throwing everything he has at the people of God. Throwing everything he has at them, trying to make this place hopeless, trying to make this place darkness, trying to make this place evil because he knows that his time is numbered. And so he wants to take down anything that God loves. This is what happens when we see death and suffering around us. One of 2 things. We give up or we find our hope. I want to share with you a quick sad story that pictures this, right? You all know that this is the case. When you go through suffering, you either draw closer into God and you find that there is something more, or you find yourself saying, I give up and I don't want to do this anymore. If you guys know the story of Job, Job is a man who had everything. He had a wife and kids and financial resources and a home. And in a matter of a few days, all of it was taken from him, and his kids were killed in a freak weather storm. His house and everything was destroyed from him. His livestock and all of his financial resources gone, and then he got these boils and sores. The only thing was left was him and his wife. And at the end of this time, as he and his wife had gone through this together, and they see all of these things happening. Daniel tries to lock in with God, and his wife says this, and I can totally relate. Some of us can relate with this. She says this in Job chapter 2, verse 7 through 9. So Satan left the Lord's presence, and he struck Job with terrible boils from head to foot. Job scraped his skin with a piece of broken pottery as he sat among the ashes, and his wife said to him, "Are you still trying to maintain your integrity? Curse God and die." What Job and Job's wife illustrate is how the brokenness of this world and the brokenness that we experience affects us. It can be something that builds up our faith in God, or it can be something that destroys our hope. And what Daniel says when he talks about the end, some rising to hope and some rising to eternal disgrace, is that. And it's not because God is cruel and he just wants to punish and he just wants to, I can't wait to throw you people into suffering. It's not that at all. This is a scene where in the brokenness of experience, there will be many who say, if this is who God is, I don't want any part of it. But the truth of the matter is, because of sin and brokenness in this world, and because of the fact that God allowed us the choice to choose him or not, when we chose not to follow him, darkness was waiting to attack. The question of Daniel chapter 12, verse 1 through 4 comes down to, where do you place your hope when everything is falling apart? Is it in you and your understanding? Or is it in the one who is greater than you, who knows the end of the story? Let's continue to go. Let's keep going here. Let's look at verse 5 through 7. And then I, Daniel, looked and saw two others standing on opposite banks of the river. One of them asked the man dressed in linen, who was now standing above the river, "How long will it be until these shocking events are over?" The man dressed in linen, who was standing above the river, raised both his hands toward heaven and took a solemn oath by the one who lives forever, saying, "It will go on for a time, times, and half a time. When the shattering of the holy people has finally come to an end, all these things will have happened." We're seeing now things from a heavenly perspective. We are seeing now as things are ending, angels standing on the sides of the Tigris River, this picture of Daniel as he's standing there in Babylon and everything falling apart. And he gets to see from the heavenly perspective the angels talking to each other. How long is all of this going to go on? How long is this all going to last? And he says a time, times, and half a time. When the shattering of God's people is complete, when everything looks like there is no hope and it's going to feel like there is nothing left to do, that there is nothing that we can do to make it through, we will see in that day Jesus return, in the evil of this world, Satan cast away into something he can never get out of, locked into hell without any more of this. Now, this shattering, again, this leads us to that question, just like we were talking about a moment ago with Job. Like, why would God allow the shattering? Why would God allow this pain? Why? You've asked that question, right? You've asked that question, most of us have. If God is good, then why? Yeah, we've talked about this before. The question, it's actually a theological term. It's called theodicy. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why, if God is there, are these things allowed? Why is it that God is allowing these things to happen? But the truth is that it's in the hard times that we realize our own inadequacy. That we realize I don't have all the answers to all the questions. And you know people, and I'm not trying to throw judgment at people, but we all know people who feel like they have all the answers to everything, and you quickly find yourself saying, but you kind of don't. Because deep down inside, it's easy for us to see in other people their own inadequacy. It's easy for us to see in other people their weaknesses and shortcomings and failures, because the reality is they're there. It's not that they're not being a jerk. All of us are not perfect. The struggle comes in being able to see that in ourselves. But it's in the refining of the hard times, in the fire, in the struggles, in these things where we find ourselves saying, I don't have all the answers. And once we do that, we place our faith in the one who does. And when we do, something amazing happens. There is a strength, there is a boldness, there is a hardening of us that is not hardening in our hearts. It's hardening in our abilities, where we set our faces towards God, and we no longer have to live in fear when everything is headed south. As I've shared with you before, I love this so much. The church, after Jesus was resurrected, knew that they were going to live with God forever, regardless of what happened here. And so when the plagues came on the Roman Empire, and Christians who were not allowed to exist in their faith oftentimes in this, when the plagues came in the Roman Empire and people abandoned their families because they saw their son with the Black Death, with the plague, they saw their son with that, and so they left their homes. Christians didn't run away. They didn't run away because they knew, hey, look, if I die in this, I got something better. But because I know that God's working, I don't have to be afraid now. And so they went to this boy who may have had who had the plague, and they would take this boy in and they would nurse him, and sometimes God would heal that boy. And that boy would grow up to be a man saying, I want to follow the same God that saved me through these people. One of the reasons that we're here today is because God worked in the darkest times through the church in the first 3 centuries of hard times, and their lives shined out. That same faith is what is going to happen in you and I just before Jesus comes back. If we are not afraid, if we are not afraid in the shattering of this time, in the hardest of these times, if we will stand in boldness and not be afraid, we will shine like stars in the universe. And we see in verse 8 through 10 as we finish up this passage today, this. I heard what he said, but I didn't understand what he meant. So I asked, how long will all this finally end? Or how will all this finally end, my Lord? But he said, go now, Daniel, for what I have said is kept secret and sealed until the time of the end. Many will be purified, cleansed, and refined by these trials, but the wicked will continue in their wickedness, and none of them will understand. Only those who are wise will know what it means. I'm going to share with you guys something real quick here. I sometimes get super frustrated with God. I know it sounds weird because I'm standing up here, but I do get frustrated because there are basically what we just saw is God gave Daniel the vision of what's coming and how these things are going to happen and detailed and how long all this is going to be. And Daniel's sharing with us, and then all of a sudden the angel says to Daniel, nope, don't say anything else. Don't tell him anything else. Just know that it's going to happen. Just be quiet. It's like somebody's telling you, and they're telling you this story, and they're getting all in. They're like, oh, you know what? You'll just have to wait to see how the rest of this ends. Wait, what? Wait, huh? You know what I'm talking about, right? That feeling. God does that with us right here. He does that with us right here. He tells Daniel what's coming, and then he says, but I'm not telling you anything else. You're going to seal it up. It's sealed. It's guaranteed that this was coming. There's, when a king's seal is placed on something, that's what's going to happen. It's going to be sealed up and it's put away. I'm not telling you anything else. He's going to give us one more detail here at the very end, but that's about it. We don't get a lot of other details. Why? So I saw a movie once, and if you know what the movie is, you're better than I do. I just saw a movie. I only remember the premise of it. I saw it when I was in junior high, maybe high school. I watched a lot of movies. Not all of them were good, but I watched a movie with I just remember the premise of this movie. This man had been given a picture in his mind. It was a sci-fi movie of the moment he was going to die. And so he knew what it was going to look like, but he didn't know anything else about it. He didn't know when it was going to happen. He didn't know what was coming. He just knew that was going to happen. And so he was walking around trying to figure out when this was going to be. And he knew as long as I didn't have this picture in my mind, if I wasn't looking at that picture, I was fine. How much would that mess you up? Right? I would just lock myself in this room so I don't have to worry about it. If I stay in this room, I won't see the picture and we're good to go. No more suffering. All of this stuff is great. It would mess up the way you live. Is it possible that the reason why God doesn't tell us the very exact details at the very end is so that we don't say, I don't have to worry about it. This hasn't happened yet and this hasn't happened yet, so we're fine. Whenever I see that happening, then I'll get serious. Whenever I see that exact detail happening, that's when I'm going to get serious. Until then, just going to kind of go along with my life. Me and God, we're good. Man upstairs, me down here, we're good to go. Is that real faith? Maybe the reason why Daniel is told right then, nope, it's sealed, it's going to happen, don't tell anybody anything else. And we see this in Revelation as well. Is so that the people of God will be faithful, trusting that even though we don't know the exact details, we know what the end looks like. See, that's what real faithfulness looks like, right? Sometimes you have to just stand. You have to just stand when everything is coming crazy. You just have to stand. And you got to push through it. When you see Revelation, if you want some homework, just go read the book of Revelation and look for the red letters of Jesus. Basically, every time Jesus talks in Revelation, his point is, don't give up. Don't give up. Whatever you're doing, don't give up. Just be faithful. Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give up. Right? If you will just keep going, you have to keep going. And for the believers of God, that's the point of why we get these stories. The struggles of this world purify us when we're ready to have them purify us. We don't always know what God is doing, but we know that he's working. And it's funny, because if you grew up in the church and you heard the stories about the coming tribulations and the darkness and the evil and all of these things, and how some, there are some that teach that all the believers will be taken away, and then there's some that teach that the believers won't, and all of these things, and whether the believers are going to be raptured away or not doesn't change the fact that our responsibility now is to be incredibly strong. May it be so that God takes the followers away, but even if it is not, there is a coming time when things are going to be hard, but at the end of the day, Jesus is coming back. And the faithful followers of God, the reason we have this here is so that we will be faithful. Let's finish with verse 11 through 13. From the time the daily sacrifices stopped, and the sacrilegious object that causes desecration is set up to be worshipped, there will be 1,290 days, and blessed are those who wait and remain until the end of the 1,335 days. As for you, go your way until the end. You will rest, and then at the end of days you will rise again to receive the inheritance set aside for you. All right, so this is the pictures here of everything is going to be worse, the worst suffering that's ever been. And 1,290 days seems to be insurmountable, but you have to be able to make it through the 1,335, this picture of the darkest and darkest of times. But the point is, can you make it through the end of this? As I said earlier, suffering does one of two things. There's an understanding of God's love and work when we trust God that's available to us in times of suffering. There are things that we can never understand about Jesus if we haven't suffered. Because Jesus suffered for us. But without faith, suffering just destroys our souls. What we see here at the end, though, is hope. Because what Daniel is told here is that there are hard times coming, there are struggles coming, that there is going to be an abomination set up against God, that the darkness is going to feel like it's going to win, and there is no hope, and everything seems like it's done. But at the end, if you can make it through, if you can remain until the end of 1,335 days, there is hope. And my favorite part of this entire chapter is verse 13. It is the point. As for you, go your way until the end. You will rest, and then at the end of days you will rise again to receive the inheritance set aside for you. What if that message is for you? As for you, go your way, live in faith until at the end of the day you pass away from this world and you will rise again to an eternal inheritance. You will rise again to a time when there is no longer suffering or bitterness or pain or death. I remember when I was a 20-year-old, this didn't mean the same to me as it does now. I probably won't share this again. I'm just going to share this with you guys. Very personal. There are times when we will stand here and we will sing, and I will think about my mom and my grandpa and the people that had a lot of people pass away in my life in 2023 that are now worshiping at the throne of God. And I get to do that with them. See, that's hope. We get to do that with them. And when this body fails, if Jesus has not come back yet, I'm going to rise to a time outside of time when I get to join in the chorus at the throne of God. Without suffering or bitterness or pain or death. And so what looks like a scary passage is actually a passage of hope. Because what the Bible is saying is no matter how bad this looks, no matter how scary this looks, if you know the end, you know the score, and you know that we win. So as today, if you're going through life and you're looking at the score of your own life and you're saying to yourself, there ain't nothing at the end of this that's good. It's a lie. If you're looking at this and saying, I don't know, Jim, you don't know what I've been through, you're 100% right. You don't. I don't. But I know the God who does, and I know that he has you here today for a purpose. Blessed are those who make it through, who stand and don't give up. Go your way. There is an inheritance coming. This is the bottom line. This is the point. There is victory in the Lord. I know that this sounds obvious in church. I know that this is something that just sounds so cheesy and quippy, but the truth of the matter is, if you can't latch onto this, you're missing the point. There is victory in God. God has victory over what cannot be beat by this world. We're never going to be able to wipe out evil in this world. You know it. I know it. We all see it. But I know the one who can. We're never going to be able to get rid of all of the darkness and evil and sin, but I know the one who can. And if you are faithful and trust God through this, listen to what Revelation 3:5 says. I love this. All who are victorious will be clothed in white. I will never erase their names from the book of life, but I will announce before my Father and his angels that they are mine. Jesus says that there is coming a time when you stand again without the brokenness of this world. And Jesus looks at the Father and he proclaims to the angel and he says, hey, I want you to see that one. You see that one right there? He's mine. See that one right there? She's mine. She is mine. She is here. There is not a time when there has to be darkness and brokenness again. If this is where you desire to be in your faith and in your walk, I've got some things to ask you to do, some things to practice with your head, with your heart, and with your hands. with your head, I want to ask you to journal about what feeds your views. What is it that is feeding the way that you see the world? How are you being discipled to see what's happening around you? Are you being discipled to see it in fear? Are you being discipled to see it in a place of control? Are you scared today? If you are, I understand. There are things I do not want to experience. But I also know the one who is greater than my experiences. And then with your heart, I want to ask you to do something. Find peace in the fact that God is not surprised by any of this. If you remember again, verse 4, but you, Daniel, keep this prophecy a secret, seal up the book until the time of the end, when many will rush here and there and knowledge will increase. Daniel says that there is coming a time when knowledge is going to increase. Kind of weird that we're in this place now where everything is understood in a way that never has been before. There's coming a time when people are going to rush here and there, and everything is going to feel like it's spinning out of control, and there's going to be this knowledge and this stuff, and it's going to feel like it's wild. Understand, find peace in the fact that God is not surprised by any of this. That what shocks us does not shock him. And lastly, I want to ask you to stand up. Stand up in the face of darkness, trusting that God is still working. Do not walk in fear, but trust that God is still working, and just stand. Just stand. If you are in a place today, here in just a moment, we're going to take communion, where, if we're being honest, you want that type of faith, but you don't have that type of faith, or you want to trust God, but you've never just said, I'm going to follow him with my life. And you and God have had a cordial relationship and not a real relationship. If that is where you are and you want to give your life to Jesus today, let today be the day. We're going to have some people up here in the front in just a few minutes while we're taking communion, and afterwards as we're singing. And if you would like to, we'll have some people in the back while we're taking communion, and then afterwards, when we're finished, we'll have some people in the front. And if you'd like to walk with God and to ask God for forgiveness and hope, if you want to know what it means to die to yourself, if today is the day that you want to die to yourself and image that in baptism and rising anew, if today is the day to stand up, come and find one of us in the back. Come and find one of us in the front. We have a woman who's going to be baptized a little later on today. A much older lady who's come up saying, I've been following Jesus, but I'm ready I want to confirm that, to be baptized, to die to myself. She wants this. If that is where you are today, let's stand up and not be afraid. I'm going to pray. John's going to come up. We're going to take communion together. Our mighty God, we see the end of this story, and I thank you for it. I thank you for the fact that your ways are greater than our ways. You understand what you're doing greater than we could ever understand. I pray that you would please direct our thoughts, direct our steps, and help us to find our hope in you. Let us be brave, because you are good. I ask in the name of Jesus. Amen.